Hello, and we are in the second quest where in the JS AI Buildathon we are moving our GitHub prototype into Azure AI Foundry. We now want to move it from just being a prototype to having it in production. And how do you do this? We have our second quest with us. And in this second quest, the idea is you want to move your AI prototype to Azure. In addition to the requirements from the last project, which is having a GitHub account, Visual Studio Code, and Node.js installed, you will need to have an Azure subscription. If you do not have one already, you can create one using a free trial, or if you're a student, use the Azure for Students way to create a new Azure account. Once created, you can then head back to GitHub Models, where we want to move our application from just using the free GitHub Models to Azure AI Foundry. When you go to GitHub Models, you'll click on the top right. The instruction is to use this model. And once you click there, it will give you something like this, as you might have done in the previous step. There are two options you can go. So you can either create a personal access token and use GitHub for free. If you want to go to production, you may hit the limits. So the idea is if you want to push your app to production, you can use Azure AI Foundry, the pay-as-you-go method. And what you do is click on Get a Production Key. Once you do that, it will create a new project for you. You will need to sign into your Azure account, select an Azure subscription, and finally deploy your model. Once your model is deployed, you can then go back to Visual Studio Code and use the Azure AI Foundry extension on Visual Studio Code. The extension, you only need to just go in and search in the extension tabs, the extension Azure AI Foundry. Once it is installed, an icon like this will appear, and you can go ahead and select the project you just created. In the project, you will have access to the models you have already deployed, and you'll also be able to have a playground where you can test it out and see, does it give me some response that I'm asking. So if, for example, you ask, give me some sarcastic tips for JavaScript developers, it should reply with something like this. You can also click on the compare feature to compare the performance of your deployed model to the other models. And if you're happy with it, you can then right click on the model and select open code file, which will generate a new code for you. Ensure you save the code as a new file. You can save the code as aifoundry.js in your project folder, and then you will need to create a .env file to add in your Azure AI Inference API and your Inference SDK endpoint. Ensure if you add in your .env file that you create also a gitignore file and add it in there to prevent it from being used and pushed directly to GitHub. In your AI Foundry.js file, you can add in additional details like add in your configuration to import your environmental variables from .env and configure that, and then try and run the file. It will give you something like this. As is with every quest, we have an activity at the end whereby you have a checklist of what you should automatically have. And the main thing here is having the AI-foundry.js file with an call to the chat/completion endpoint of your deployed model. Once that's done, commit your code to GitHub, push it to GitHub, and then wait for about 15 seconds for GitHub Actions to update your README on to the next step. And that's it for our second quest.